Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for being with me for today's devotion from Leviticus chapter 17. It's not a long chapter, but it is an interesting chapter, and I imagine you had a few questions after reading it. There's a lot in here about blood, about Jewish people sacrificing animals on their own outside the camp rather than bringing them to the tent of meeting or the tabernacle per se and letting the priest be part of the sacrifice. Sacrificing animals to a goat demon. There's information in here about prohibiting the Jews from eating, drinking blood. And if they were hunting and killed an animal, they were to, in the process of cleaning and processing the meat, drain the blood and cover it with dirt, not drink it, eat it. If they found an animal that had died of natural causes, or had been killed by another animal and they ate it, they became religiously unclean, ritually unclean for a period of time, and so on. So there's a lot of interesting stuff in here about the blood. But you also have in this chapter probably as clear an expression as anywhere in the Scripture of the connection for the Jewish people, the way God had them look at life and sacrifice and atonement, the connection between the blood and life and atonement. For instance, look at verse 11. He says, for the life of the flesh is in the blood. We know that if you bleed out, you die. Common sense. But the association between blood and life. And God says, I have given it to you on the altar to make atonement for your soul. So sprinkling the blood, remember, on the horns of the altar and pouring it out around the altar and different things that were part of the sacrifices we've looked at already in the book of Leviticus. A life for a life. So an animal was sacrificed, its life was sacrificed, symbolized, that sacrifice of life symbolized in the blood. And the blood being poured out at the altar and on the horns of the altar and so on was symbolic of that animal sacrifice being instead of, in place of, making atonement for the sins of the sinner, the one bringing the sacrifice. So he says in verse 11, for the life of the flesh is in the blood, for it is the blood by reason of the life that makes atonement. You see the same thing, or very similar, in verse 14 of Leviticus 17, where it says, for the life of all flesh, its blood is identified with its life. Yes, we get that. Therefore, because of that, because blood is associated with life, therefore God said to the sons of Israel, you are not to eat the blood of any flesh, for the life of all flesh is its blood. Whoever eats it shall be cut off. So you're not symbolically not taking someone else's life, so to speak, by eating or drinking their blood. Now, you read the word cut off in here several times if they committed any of these particular grievances or sins. Cut off can mean several things. It can mean to be spiritually ostracized, cut off, spiritually isolated. It can mean to be relationally ostracized, cut off, and in rare occasions can mean death. In this chapter, I think it has to do with relational and spiritual isolation or ostracization until they make atonement for the sin that got them in trouble here. So you remember our devotion yesterday from Leviticus chapter 12, that when a woman gave birth, she was considered unclean and had to go through a ritual cleansing process, purification process, either 40 days or 80 days, depending on the gender of the child, because of the blood associated with birth, the blood associated with menstrual cycle, etc. Again, it goes back to this idea of the blood is associated, symbolic of life. Life is in the blood, but it's also symbolic of life, and all of that. So this passage makes that clear. And think about Jesus. He sacrificed his life for us on the cross to make atonement for our sin. But the Bible talks about the shedding of his blood for the remission of our sin. And the giving of Jesus' blood is the giving of his life. His life actually is in the blood, but the blood is also symbolic of his life, the sacrifice that he made for us to make atonement for my sin, for your sin, for our souls. So all of that ties together. Now, devotionally, I want to talk about something different from this chapter. Verses 3 and following, let's read it, and this is just a real quick devotion. Verse 3 says, any man from the house of Israel, so any Jewish man, who slaughters an ox or a lamb or a goat in the camp, or who slaughters it outside the camp, so wherever you do it, okay, and has not brought it to the doorway of the tent of meeting, the tabernacle, to present it as an offering for the Lord before the tabernacle of the Lord, blood guiltiness is to be reckoned to that man. He's sinning. He has shed blood, and that man shall be cut off from among his people. Now, this is not talking about the normal slaughtering of animals for food. The picture here is someone slaughters an animal, whether they do it in the camp, in the neighborhood where people are, or outside the camp, out where nobody is, but they slaughter that animal as a sacrifice. They don't bring it to the tent of meeting. They do not bring it to the tabernacle, and with the assistance of the priest, offer it as a sacrifice. They go out here, some other location, they do it on their own as a sacrifice. He says they are guilty of blood guiltiness. They are sinning and shall be cut off. Verse 5, the reason is so that the sons of Israel may bring their sacrifices. See, it's not just slaughtering animals for food. It is sacrifice, which they were sacrificing in the open field, that they may bring them in to the Lord, to the doorway of the tent of meeting, to the priest, and sacrifice them as sacrifices of peace offering to the Lord. The priest shall sprinkle the blood on the altar of the Lord at the doorway of the tent of meeting. Just inside the door, inside the curtain of the tabernacle, was the altar where animals were sacrificed and blood sprinkled and so on. And then they burn the meat, part of the meat anyway, as a smoke offering on the altar. Verse 7, they shall no longer sacrifice their sacrifices to the goat demons, with which they play the harlot. The goat, there were various pagan religions of the surrounding nations that use goats as idols, as symbols of their god, and the Jewish people during their wilderness wanderings played the harlot and sacrificed to these other gods at times. He says this is a permanent statute. You are not to sacrifice to the goat demon, to any idol, to any pagan deity. Verse 8, then you shall say to them, any man from the house of Israel or from the aliens who sojourn among them, so immigrants, who offer a burnt offering or sacrifice and does not bring it to the doorway of the tent of meeting to offer it to the Lord, that man shall be cut off from his people. So what is he saying here? Very simply this: don't offer a sacrifice of an animal to God as a Jewish person or as a non-Jew living within the borders, the boundary of the people of Israel. Don't offer any sacrifice, whether to a pagan god or even to God himself. Don't offer any sacrifice on your own. You offer a sacrifice to God, he says, you are to bring it to the tabernacle, to the tent of meeting, and do it the way God has prescribed, with the assistance of priest. Don't go off and do it by yourself how you want to, on your own. And I was reading all that, and I got to thinking about how it's always been true to some extent, but more so today maybe than ever before. People talk about, I'm not Christian, but I'm spiritual. And I have my own way of worshiping God, and I don't need the church, and I don't need the people of God. I'm going to do my own thing. The old joke is, I can worship God on the golf course. I can worship God on the lake. And while we are not explicitly commanded not to think that way or do that, the principle is that you don't do things the way you want, irregardless of what God actually says in his word. You are not, you're free to do whatever you want, but you're not free to do it the way you want and think that automatically pleases God. God established the church and tells us not to forsake the assembling or gathering of ourselves together, as is the habit of some people. There is no basis in Scripture for being spiritual but not Christian, and I'm going to do religion my own way. I don't need the church. I don't need the people of God. I'm going to give my stuff to God the way I want to. No, you can try, but that doesn't mean it's accepted by the Lord. because you're not in charge. He is. And that's something for us to remember. And one more point. There is something to be said for submitting yourself in accountability to other people. And there are just some people who don't want to be accountable to anyone, even God. Oh, they might say they're accountable to God, but really they're accountable to the God they create in the figment of their own imagination. Are you willing to be submissive to God and to what He has prescribed? And sometimes that is demonstrated by your accountability to the people of God, to a local church. And I'm always suspect of anyone's religion that is not accountable to a church, to the people of God. I think it's an unbiblical approach to God. That's the word for today. I'll see you tomorrow as we look at Leviticus chapter 18. God bless you, everybody. Have a great day.